Hey guys, welcome to Gate Church Online. We're super excited that you joined us this week for our service.
If you want to know more information about our church, you can go online at gatechurch.net. Now, let's get to the message.
4 of our series, God's Fingerprint. Last week was awesome. If you missed it, I'll do a little recap here. In the first part of our series, we talked about the worst decision ever made. Luckily, it was not yours. It was Adam and Eve. They made the worst decision ever made. But it's also linked to the decisions that we make. And in this series, I've been talking about those decisions. In part 2, we dealt with Daniel. And it was a political week for us, but we talked about standing up against evil at all costs. And we paralleled the life of Daniel with the life of every Christian in this place. Last week we talked about the most important decision outside of your decision for Jesus Christ, and it's your marriage. And we waited to put it online on purpose for those of you that missed. But it will be on there this week. Today I've titled this message Transfer. And I want to talk to you about your finances, the area of finances. I know sometimes that it can get kind of boring to talk about money. And, sometimes we assume that we know everything there is to know. But I want to say some things to try to help you in your area of finances. Because we make these type of decisions every day and every week. Even when the economy is good and growing, people make bad decisions. That's usually when we make most of them. It's not so much when it's bad. We tend to pull back. We tend to save a little bit more when it's not so good. And so don't feel condemned if you've made those bad decisions in a good economy. But in a bad economy, those decisions that we've made, which I think we're about to hit one, by the way, those decisions that we've made, they intensify. They get worse. So, I have the advantage. I was the younger child. I have an older sister and an older brother. I would watch them make all the bad decisions. Not that I never made any. I'd watch them blow it up and, just go down the wrong road. And so I got the advantage. I got to learn from them. But sometimes when we have our finances in place, we don't learn from others. We don't look until it's time to make some corrections, until it's time to fix some things, and sometimes it can be too late. Y'all are going to have to amen me this morning. Last week we talked about turning bad marriages into good marriges. When it comes to our money, bad investments can lead to bad marriages. We're not communicating. The spouse in that marriage, you should be communicating about the money that you spend, about where it's going, where it's coming. If you don't and you just kind of make your own decisions, unless you're single, if you just make your own decisions, you're asking for a good old fight in your marriage. But I know many that have done this. I know someone real close to me, the marriage, they had different accounts. And it wasn't just a business account and a personal account. They had completely different checking accounts. And they fought and fought and fought until they got a divorce. This stuff can affect you. And I'm not saying that everybody has that. Everybody has different situations that we deal with. Instead of coming together, these families can be torn apart. I'm reminded of a story I recently heard. Someone that I know, the husband just went out and bought some expensive tires for his truck. Didn't tell his wife. Well, they didn't have enough money for groceries. I've never understood that kind of stupidity. But it happens. It goes on. Even in the church, you have different families that just, maybe they're not taught. Maybe they don't think things through. Maybe they don't think bad will ever come to them. But see, COVID-19, when this crisis hit our nation, it's something that we need to be thinking about. It's something that we need to be planning about, the area of our finances. No matter how much these couples love each other, the fighting overpowers their love. Am I talking to real people today? Even the most committed Christians, when it comes to money, it can shatter their faith. And just completely, they get so focused on that, they forget what's really important. I've got my first point today. You can write this down. Read the fine print. The first step to turning this into God's best. Let's say you have some bad financial consequences. Here's the first step to turning that into God's best. We're talking about taking second best and God turning it into first best, is to truthfully acknowledge past decision. Most people, when they're signing for a house or buying a car, they don't read the fine print. Because you got the salesman or the lawyer tapping the table and they're huffing and puffing, and it's because they might have some hidden stuff in that fine print. But you need to read the fine print. You need to say, I don't care if this takes your whole day. I'm going to read what I'm signing. I don't care if this hurts your feelings. I'm going to read what I'm signing. We don't read the fine print of how our decisions will affect other people. So in the case of this spouse that bought the tires without asking his wife, just going, it's my money and all that kind of attitude, he didn't realize that it was going to affect his entire family. And I'll move away from that example in just a minute. So if there's need for forgiveness, and I'll be quite honest, if you don't tithe, you need to be repenting to God and you need to be repenting to one another. It's just the way it is. It's something that God has set up. And then you need to reevaluate your budget. So if forgiveness is needed, you can't just force them to get over it. And why don't you quit bringing this up and throwing this in my face? You have to wait until that relationship gets that trust restored. Because some things that happen in our finance, we break the trust with our spouse. We break the trust with our kids. No one intends their investments to go sour. I didn't wake up today and say, I can't wait to screw up my financial life. It happens subtly. And I mean, you know every decision, you know how you got there, but it's not like you planned to do that. It's not like you planned to hurt other people. It's not like you planned to be in the situation that you are. And God can take that and He can work miracles, but you have to be honest with yourself. You have to be honest with Him. If you've been here for a while, you've heard the story about when we bought a lemon car. And it was a foolish decision. But it started with us acknowledging that it was a stupid decision. That we ignored the red flags. And we repented to God. And then we learned. See, if that never would have happened, we never would have learned, and we probably would have made a dumb mistake down the road. So it's not all bad that you get backed in a corner sometimes. That's how you learn. That's how you get out of things. So self-justification has to end. Let me break this down. If I'm doing something wrong and Deanna's like, why are you doing this? Why'd you do that with our money? Why'd you do that? I cannot be self-justifying myself. I have to, in that moment, be honest with her. It's got to prevail. So maybe some of this is in your past. If you've squandered your savings, admit it. It's amazing how many people struggle with admitting their wrongdoings. I wonder how they got saved sometimes. Seriously, because you got to admit that you're a sinner in need of grace. Just admit it. If you've ignored wise counsel, admit it. Because it's not just the lost finances. There are ruptured relationships that are involved there. Only an attitude of honesty and confession can lay a foundation for restoration. We've had some very real conversations. We've had to switch. When we first got married, she did the finances. She couldn't handle it. She's got her own business. It was getting too crazy, and so I took it on. But I don't just do it without any communication. It's amazing how much stuff I got to remember for other people. Seriously. We've got to own up to us remembering what we need to be doing. Y'all look like y'all are struggling real bad with this message. Here's the thing, the wise and the fool make mistakes. But the wise person learns from their mistakes, and the foolish person repeats their foolishness. And Proverbs talks about the wise person and the foolish person. And you should read Proverbs if you need help in this area. We should not waste our time concentrating over things that cannot be changed. So there's some things that are in your lap right now. The situation cannot be changed. You just have to accept it. This is kind of what the underlying thread in this whole series is about, kind of where God's had me this year. Things that I've prayed for and the prayers didn't happen the way I wanted. And I have to accept that limitation. I have to accept it, not let it create more doubts, but just trust that God knows the bigger plan. And it's even more true in your finances. Maybe you're not making what you think you should be making. Maybe you're in a dead-end job. Maybe you're miserable in a good job. God hears those prayers just like He hears the other prayers for other things. He sees your heart. Turn that energy into keeping the right attitude, into thinking optimistically. We just finished a series, Positive Vibes. You have to think, I can get out of this hole. I can get out of this mess. I can change my spending habits. If you can't do anything about it, then put it out of your mind. I know what I'm asking you is not easy to do. You have to do it. There are things that I could not change in our finance. And I had to just trust God. I had to keep tithing. I had to keep giving. I had to keep believing. And I've seen God just in random, boring weeks, boring days. I've seen Him do great miracles in our life. You may have to sell some stuff. Uh-oh. If the car is worth more than your house, you don't need that car. You don't. If you're struggling to make ends meet, sell the car. Maybe sell your house. I know many people that have gotten out of debt by selling a house. Amen, Tasha. She's a realtor. You may have to sell some stuff, but you can still count your blessings. And I'm going to teach in a minute. The next point I'm going to teach you how to do this. I have a picture of a forest that was burned down by a fire. I don't know if you've ever seen that happen. But even a forest that's been completely annihilated can regrow again. Maybe a firestorm has come to your finances. The credit card debt is just outrageous. And you feel like you'll never pay this off. You feel like you'll never get out of this. God can restore that forest again. So couples, instead of fighting with each other, this is key. We have to turn to one another and say, we can get through this together. Start fighting your real enemies, the debt and the devil. Because the devil will compound on that. He'll get in there and discourage you. He'll get in there and try to defeat you. David's mighty men, it says they were distressed, discontented, and in debt. It's funny how debt is linked with those other feelings of spiritual just discontentment. And so our money can make us feel those ways. Our debt can make us feel those ways, even in our relationship with God, if we're so distracted by them. Does that make sense? Most financial decisions, this is the hard part, are based on some level of greed. And think about it this way. Our willingness to go into debt for cars, for appliances, for vacations proves that. It's what the Bible calls the lure of money. You know you can't afford it. We drool over gas stoves in Lowe's. I could stay in there all day. We have that same lure. One time I was like, let's just do it. She's like, we are not doing this. Arguing in Lowe's. We deal with those same things you deal with. This is why money is such a sensitive subject, because it makes all the same promises that God does. Did you know that? That's why Jesus said you can't serve both God and money. Money says it will sustain us in good times and in bad times. That it will support us when we are sick and buy us pleasure when we are well. It promises security now, and if we have enough of it, security for the rest of our lives. In other words, if we have money, we can be independent of the church, independent of our family, and we think even independent of God. And that's where the danger lies. Money does not promise the same things that God does, but most people live like it does. Point number 2 is read the blueprint. We'll go to 1 Timothy. I want to just teach you today. Let the Bible instruct us on money. 1 Timothy 6, verse 6 through 10. But godliness actually is a means of great gain. It's not just you having a big savings account. When accompanied by contentment. That's a powerful scripture. People don't feel like they're gaining because they're not content. For we have brought nothing into this world. You've heard your mama say that growing up. We've brought nothing into this world so that we cannot take anything out of it either. You also heard her say, I'll take you out. If we have food and covering with these, we shall be content. But those who want to get rich fall into temptation and a snare and many foolish and harmful desires which plunge men into ruin and destruction. I think in that verse, the Bible actually means to say men there and not just a generic gender. For the love of money is the root of all sorts of evil, and by longing for it, some by longing for it have wandered away from the faith and pierced themselves with many griefs. God didn't pierce you with that grief. You did. Your debt did. The consequence of that did. And sometimes that's why you got to be honest. Just acknowledge it up front. I blew it. That money, men are real bad about it. Want to get rich, want to just succeed. That's why probably women tend to worship more in church. My whole life it's been that way. The men need to rise up and be content. Be content with what you have. You can still pray big prayers. You can still step out in faith. You can still get a different job. But if you don't get content, you'll always search and seek, and it'll never satisfy. We're born discontented. It's because of the sinful nature. And the thing is, when Jesus moves in, we're to stop being discontented. But some people don't get that simple fact, and they die that way. They go to their grave discontented. They go to their grave with regrets and mishaps and just longing for the past more than the future. God wants us to be satisfied with what we have, but also with what we are. One reason we struggle with what we have is because we haven't discovered what we are, who we really are. We sang about it today. And it's not until you get that revelation, it's on the inside, the gain, the investments on the inside, in the heart. Out of the heart a man gives. Till you get that revelation, it'll always be messed up. You won't find this in secular places either. Financial hard times force us to examine our motives honestly. Was this foolish decision based on greed, Was God even asked? That's a good one. I always start there. Were the warning signs ignored? Once you get to that level of honesty, then you can ask God to help you get out of that trouble. And I think it's God's grace that has saved many of us from almost blowing it financially. But we were too blind from the lure of money and the temptation that we almost got ourselves into unnecessary debt. And so He let a crisis hit so we would wait for wisdom. I know that's kind of tough, but James 1:5 says this, "But if any of you lacks wisdom," doesn't say money, wisdom, "let him ask of God, who gives to all generously and without reproach, and it will be given to him." See, we underestimate how generous God really is. It's not that more money will come to get you out of that bind. What you need is the wisdom of God to come into that situation. And He will give it to you. I've seen this work in our own lives so many times. James is the practical book. Before God sends provision in the mailbox, sometimes He sends a check of wisdom. We rip that check up. God's not going to send us all this stuff for us to just continue to act foolishly. Sometimes He wants us to correct the way. He wants us to correct the inward habits, those lures, the pulls towards this world. God should have been consulted before the investment. God should be consulted for wisdom after the failure. Some people are so prideful that they never ask God to help them. Boomers are real bad about this. Hate to beat up on you. Boomers struggle to say sorry. They do. And sometimes we just got to own up to it. We don't need to teach the next generation these things. Couples should never make a financial investment unless they 100% agree. Now, some of you spouses never speak up. And you act like there's communication, but if you speak up, there is hell to pay. Let's just be honest. You have to start speaking up. There's not agreement there. A marriage that makes you shut your mouth and always wants you to listen to them run their mouth is not a healthy marriage. And you are not communicating. Let's just own up to it. You have to let the other person, even if they have a smaller personality when it comes to confrontation, you have to let them speak up. They may have some wisdom to glean from. God wants us to learn this, that He is with us during prosperity and during adversity. He's with us. In Genesis 26, verse 2 and 3, a famine came to where Isaac was, and the Lord told him in verse 2, the Lord appeared to him and said, "Do not go down to Egypt, but stay in the land of which I tell you." COVID-19 hits, everybody goes to Florida and thinks that somehow it won't go down there with them in the car. If you have been to Florida and you're complaining about coming to church because of the crowd, I don't want to hear your opinion, by the way. That place was nuts. I was like, God, am I going to get sick being around all this mob? Don't go into a Walmart, dear God. He tells them, don't leave. Don't leave the land of COVID. Sojourn in this land, and I will be with you, and I will bless you, for to you and to your descendants I will give all these lands, and I will establish the oath which I swore to your father Abraham. I love this because God did not tell him to leave the famine. Rather, God chose to take him all the way through the famine and show him how to trust and that He was going to bless him. Sometimes God doesn't bail us out of some crisis and some circumstances on purpose. And you can't be mad at Him or you'll miss the blessing. He takes us all the way through it. This isn't preached very much in the Church of America. We get told that He'll rescue us from everything. And the thing is, God loves you when you can pay your mortgage, and He loves you when you can't pay the mortgage. He loves you when you make those great decisions and you're puffed up because you made a good decision. But He also loves you when you've blown it and made some bad decisions. He's not out to make you suffer over those things. Seek the wisdom because God knows the way out. 2 Corinthians 8:2. Look at these people. It says, they were in a great ordeal of affliction, but their abundance of joy and their deep poverty overflowed in the wealth of their liberality. In deep poverty, they were still given to God. I believe you should give 10% to God, and then if He tells you, you need to be sensitive to His voice and give. It's just that simple to me. I don't know how else to explain it. But look at this verse, Proverbs 15:22. Without consultation, plans are frustrated, but with many counselors, they succeed. If you never ask the Lord, if you never ask somebody else that's good with their money, you're always going to stay frustrated financially. And here's the thing, your help has to match the size of your problem. Don't go ask your friend that can't read the difference between a $10 bill and a $20 bill about your financial lifestyle. Don't go ask the person who thinks they're always right. Ask somebody that's proven. And don't just look at all the stuff they have. They could be in more debt than you are. Find people. Find those counselors. Find just people that know more than you do about the matter so that your plans for the future are not frustrated, but they succeed. If you need more help, advisors, financial advisors can help you with this. Your pastor, some pastors can do more than just preach to you. They know money. They deal with volunteers who aren't paid. They deal with budgets that are solely upon vision and trust. That means if they're good, they know how to handle money. If they're good, they know how to help you handle your money. Not always, but some. This one's good with it. Ask a business leader. There's several business leaders in our community that don't even go to this church, and I go to them for help because I admire them. I admire how they handle money. Go to your banker. They might help you and say, man, you sure have a lot of fees. If you pay stuff on time, you won't have all these fees show up. You could save this amount of money without all these fees, which, by the way, is how a bank makes money. Married couples should be completely open with each other on all financial issues. I can't stress this enough. No hidden accounts. If you have hidden accounts, you need to stop. Secret money or even impulse spending. Deal with the trust issues or conflicts before you even attempt to have a comeback plan. I want to read you a few more scriptures in Philippians chapter 4, verse 11 and 13. Not that I speak from want, for I have learned to be content in whatever circumstances I am. I know how to get along with humble means. I also know how to live in prosperity. So he's not saying that we have poverty mindsets. In any and every circumstance, I've learned the secret of being filled and going hungry, both of having abundance and suffering need. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. That has to do with money and with the inside. Not just so you can quote that verse so you can go do something that's out of God's will. Ecclesiastes 5:10 says, "He who loves money will not be satisfied with money, nor he who loves abundance with its income. This too is vanity." Jesus said in Luke 12:15, "Beware and be on your guard against every form of greed." That means greed will come to you in different ways, different disguises. "For not even when one has an abundance does his life consist of his possessions." Jesus was very smart. So we have a choice. We could either live above our means, which most people, there's a lot of millennials do. You live way above your means. You can either live within your means, or you can live below your means because you didn't follow God's plan. That's the choice. When you're in a hole and you want to get out, you got to stop digging. I get in these a lot in my marriage. Just put the shovel down. So here's some practical things. I'm going to blaze through these. I want to help you. Most financial failure is due to overextended credit. Your credit cards. Overextended. And you may or may not agree with me, I don't really care. If you use your credit card to pay for bills so that you can rack up points and all that, you're playing with fire. You need to figure out another way. Just pay your bills on time. And I know people do that. It's not wise. All the financial advisors and investors out there will tell you it's not wise. It's not. We're talking about wisdom here. The average couple has more than $9,000 in credit card debt. So that's where you need to start. Start with your small debt purchases and pay them off, or the higher interest. Those interest rates will kill you. Again, sell a house, sell a car, whatever you got to do to get out of that. We must allow financial crisis to teach us about the effects of debt. And because of this, we've raised a generation that lives above their means. And they don't understand that you have to pay for that. A lot of people don't understand what was giving was not free money. Tax season's about to backhand a lot of people. So you do need to be saving. I'm not trying to scare you, but you need to. Some teach that debt is a necessary choice. The Bible teaches that debt destroys. Debt ensnares. Debt can even impoverish. Don't think that you'll escape it without God's wisdom, without God's plan. What we do, we took our credit cards out of our wallet and we put them in our safe. Because sometimes you need them. I'm not one of those that's against them. Sometimes you need them for an emergency, but Dave Ramsey preaches to have an emergency fund where you can pay cash for it. Not right now. God, people don't know what to do when they see cash. Socrates said, "The unexamined life is not worth living." So you have to examine, what are the things in my financial life that are causing the problems. They're not just going to go away. Here's just a couple of things. If a family of 4 eats out 3 times a week, and you stop doing that, you could save almost $400 a month. What about your cell phone bill? Do you really need all that stuff that the salesman sold you? Does your 2-year-old really need a cell phone? Come on. You could save several $100s there. Don't overlook the opportunities to save money. We talked a lot about this during COVID-19. Just our own family, different things that we can do to pull back, to reserve. I'm closed with this. No matter where you are, good or bad, make a deliberate decision today to surrender your assets to God, not just your 10%. There are a group of Christians that struggle to get to the 10%. Once you get to the 10%, you have to realize it's all His. The trust every day, every week. Transfers, why I called this transfer. Transfer your ownership to Him. I call it a burden transfer. It's where you put the burden where it belongs in God's hands. See, if you're doing the right thing and seeking the wisdom of God, you'll always find a way out of your problems, your financial problems especially. He will always show you the way, and that's what these scriptures teach us. Let's stand to our feet.
Thanks for joining us today. If you want to help us continue our vision here in Clarksville, Georgia, you can give online at gatechurch.net/give.
Yes, we cannot wait to see you back here next Sunday. Have a great week.